Thursday, January 6, 2011. Dinner and learn God of our understanding. Lesson 6.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Judaism and Recovery. We're now studying God of Understanding, Jewish Spirituality and Recovery from Addiction by Rabbi Shais Taub. And we have read the introduction. We have read part 1, which described the problem as a spiritual disease. And we're now tackling part 2, which is the solution. The solution has two chapters to it, chapter 4 and chapter 5. And chapter 4, how it works, not why. This chapter we're going to discuss what the solution is and why it is a solution to the problem. I like to start with, actually, on page 40, I would like to skip to the end of the chapter for a second. To the end of the chapter for a second, and the story of the canary or canary? Canary? Last week it was so hard for me with no feedback. I was like, I'm mispronouncing all these words.
Canary,
okay.
They make Canada.
Yeah. Canary. All right. On the bottom of page 40. Canary. Again, I feel compelled to remark that this is just my personal take on things, but I view the process of discovering the steps as being very much like the way that miners of old would use a canary to test the air in the coal mine. In the days before mine shafts had proper ventilation, and bottom of page 40, miners would bring a canary in a cage down with them whenever forging into a new area of the mine. Canaries are more sensitive to poisonous gases than human beings. So as long as the canary was alive, the miners knew the air in the new area was safe to breathe. If the canary stopped singing, the miners knew it was time to get out of that part of the mine. The canary was not a toxicologist or whatever expert you would consult in order to determine whether or not air is safe to breathe. A canary is just a bird. A bird that when it breathes poison happens to die quicker than a human. There's no witchcraft to it. There's no miracle to it. There's no secret to it. It's just a fact. Canaries die quicker than human beings when exposed to gases. So if I don't want to die, I follow the canary. The early pioneers of recovery were the subjects of their own experimentation because they had to be. We'll call them the canaries. The canaries. Those who survived saw what did and did not work. If a certain idea or practice is spiritually harmful to human being, the addict would be the first to show symptoms. If a certain idea or practice is spiritually harmful to human beings in general, not specifically to addicts, if it's harmful to general human beings, the first people who will get hurt from it are the addicts. So that we are the canaries. There you go. If a certain idea or practice promotes spiritual wellness in human beings, it would be evident in the addict by his or her relief from the compulsion to use. So basically, that's what this chapter is about. This chapter is about telling us that the program of recovery is certainly very spiritual, but it's definitely not magic. The way we know it works is because it works. That's it. Period. All right. Let's go back now that we kind of came to the conclusion. Now we can go through the chapter. And we'll kind of try to read some, skip some, have a good time. So the story, the parable of recovery, it's a cute story, so we'll read it. An addict is driving along all alone in his car one night on an empty highway. He's depressed beyond words, thinking how miserable he is and how he would do anything to get sober and have a normal life. Suddenly, as he's zooming down the highway and thinking, he hears the voice of God. G0d. I hear you looking for sobriety, says God. Yes, he says. And well, you're in luck today, says God, because I happen to have sobriety and it can be yours for a reasonable price. How much? How much have you got? I've got $20 in my pocket. You're in luck, says God. The price of sobriety today happens to be exactly $20. But that's everything I got, the man protests. If I give you all my money, how will I buy gas for the car? A car, says God. Oh, I see. The price of sobriety is $20 and your car. But if I give you my car, how would I get to work tomorrow? Work, says God. You have a job. The price of sobriety is $20, your car, and your job. But if I give you my job, then I want to get paid. I need to pay the mortgage this week. A mortgage? You mean you have a house? I hate to tell you this, but the price of sobriety just went up. It's $20, your car, your job, and your house. Where my family live. Family! You got a wife and kids. The price of sobriety is $20, your car, your job, the house, and your wife and your kids. At this point, the man decides to shut up. Are you willing to take it, asks God? The man nods. He's desperate, right? He'll do anything, go to any length to get it. God takes everything. And he's about to give the man his sobriety. But one thing, says God, before I give you sobriety, there's something else I want you to do for me. The man nods again. See this $20? Says God. It's not your $20. It's my $20. You know that. But I want you to take it from me. And I want you to be my emissary. To spend it as I would. And you see this car? It's not your car. It's my car. I want you to use it as I would. At this job, I want you to go work and earn a paycheck, but it's not your job, it's my job. I want you to behave there as I would. And this family, this wife, these kids are not your family, they're my family. But I want you to take care of them for me the way that I would. Can you do all that? The man nods again. Here it all is. And here's your sobriety. So the man gets back all of his life. And there's something to be said about the fact, not only that God gives him back his life and his work, but that God actually entrusts this man with God's car. Or you know what, maybe not God's car, but God's family. That's the big deal here. God says to the man, I'll give you back my family for you to take care of it, because I trust that if you have sobriety, you will behave around this family the way I would. So that's basically recovery in a nutshell. Number one, addicts get tired of trying to make everything work. Number two, addicts gives up and lets higher power take over. 3, addicts experiences unusual freedom, happiness, and usefulness as long as, and to the extent that, addict does not renege on previous decision. I am sure, says the author, that people who suffer from other conditions that are also incurable, progressive, and fatal would be thrilled if their disease could be treated just as easily. So now it's easy to be in recovery. It almost seems too good to be true, and would be if everybody who needed the solution knew about it, and everyone who knew about it actually used it. But the irony of addiction is, as many people in recovery have to point out, that is a disease that tells you that you don't have a disease. And therefore, the people who could use it the most are the people who are the least likely to use it. Hence, we have a problem. A universal problem of addiction, of alcoholism, because people who can use the solution the most are the least likely to find it and to use it. Another way of putting it, and these are three, I like this one, is that when you're full of yourself, it's very hard to see that you are the problem. Or conversely, when you need God the most, God is the last thing you want. So this is the whatchamacallit of addiction. Huh? No, it's another word. Something that's a contradiction. Huh? The paradox. Thank you. The paradox. Thank you, Frenchman.
So much more.
Oh yeah. So this is the paradox. There's not much more to recovery than that the addict just follows some basic rules of living and is relieved from the obsession to use. It sounds just like a neat trick, but as the old slogan goes, there's no magic in recovery, just miracles. Okay, so here's the bottom line. There's nothing magical about recovery. If you look at the big book and you read what it says, there's nothing earth-shattering in there. There's absolutely nothing earth-shattering in there. It just says, live like a normal human being. How do we know that what the way for normal human beings to live is? We have two ways of finding out. One way is the religious way. I believe in God. God created the world in 6 days and 6 nights. God gave the Torah, the Bible, which is the blueprint of the world. And by following everything that it says in the Bible, I will know how to live in this world. Because this world was created based on the blueprint of the Torah. When my new fridge comes to the house, if I want to know which way is the most useful way of using my fridge, I will look at the manual. It will tell me that if I put it too close to the oven without insulation, it's not going to work. It tells me that if I put it too close to the wall without room for circulation, the motor is going to die. It tells me that if I leave it open all night, something is going to break. It tells me that if I do not seal the water supply, then it's going to leak. It tells me a bunch of stuff of how to use the fridge. Why do I follow it? Because it came from the manufacturer of the fridge. If the manufacturer of the fridge tells me that he built the fridge, and this is how it was meant to be, that if I follow the rules of how it's meant to be, then I will enjoy my fridge the way it was supposed to be enjoyed. Then there is a website called Life Hacks. What's Life Hacks? Anybody knows? Anybody's familiar? Life Hacks? Life Hacks. Basically, it's a website, you can Google it later, and it tells you how to use everyday items in your house in ways that are not necessarily written in the manuals, but it has been tested and experienced by people, and by doing so you save even more energy, or you can do some trick with your fridge that you didn't know your fridge can do, etc. So the same way that there is for a program on the computer, on your bank account, and your website, there are people who type these codes that know how to hack into a computer, into a system, to make it do things that it was not originally meant to do, or to use it for the exact opposite reason that it was made to do. So too, in life, there's life hacks, which you can use a bunch of items in your own life, a bunch of tools that are not originally made by the manufacturer this way, but based on the experience of hundreds and thousands who have tried and voted for those hacks and commented of how to do them better, we now have ways to find out how to use these items in useful ways. So one is based on faith, because I have to believe blindly whatever it says in the paper. It doesn't say on the paper that this has been tried, but because it came together with the fridge, then I assume that it's going to work for me. And even more so when we talk about God's Word, it's totally based on faith. I don't believe God's Word because I have a proof that God exists. I believe in God because I believe in God. This is faith. And then there are things that work in life because the people before me tried them as a group, and they wrote down what worked for them and what didn't. Now, why should I trust this group of people? They say it worked for them. The question is, what's at stake for them? And what's at stake for me? Let's go back to the mines. We had a story 6 months ago with the 33 miners in Chile. If they will write a manual now of how to survive in the mine for how long?
2 weeks, I think.
No, 2 months. North of 60 days. Okay? That's one thing. I have one manual. Then, I have another manual in front of me. That manual was written by a gamer. The gamer plays a game on his Nintendo, on his Wii, or whatever it is, and the game is a game of survival. And he experienced the most harsh conditions through his game, and he wrote a manual of how to survive under these conditions in the game. Now, when I am going to go in the mine and I want to have room in my pocket just for one manual, which manual would I take? Or, if I'm going to play the game of the miners, which manual would I take? And the answer is simple. I always have to follow the manual of the people that have at least as much at stake, as much to lose than I do. If I am going to play a game, then I can choose to take the manual of the people who played the game, or the manual of the people who went down the mine. But when I go down the mine, I can't take the risk of taking the book of the guy whose only thing that was at stake was the next level in his game, or that he's going to lose the game, or his prestige, or maybe even a money price for the person who survives the longest in the game of mine. $1 million even. The guy won $1 million, but I'm going to put my life on the line in the real mine. So, who do I follow? The person that has at least the same stakes as me. So what's at stake for me? What's at stake for me when I am in recovery? My life. Because I have been that close to losing it. Because people who have been in the same pattern of behavior as me lost it. because before I came to recovery, I was dying. So now which manual do I want to follow? Do I want to follow the manual of the people who are looking to be enlightened? Who are looking for extra spirituality in their lives so that they can feel good about their environment? Do I follow the manual of the people who sometimes sped in driving and now got a lot of tickets and owe a lot of money, so I follow their manual? Do I follow the manual of the people who sometimes got angry and lost their job? Do I follow the manual of the people even that sought to find deeper ways of practicing the 613 commandments? Or do I follow the manual of the people whose life were at stake and survived? And that's pretty much the only reason that we follow this solution. The solution is a solution for us. Solution for us. Because what is at stake for us is the same that was at stake on that level for the people in that book. And it doesn't matter which fellowship we're talking about. We could talk about a fellowship of alcoholics. We could talk about a fellowship of codependence. We could be talking about a fellowship of process addiction, food addictions. It doesn't matter. What's at stake for me is what is at stake for them. I don't need faith. I don't need religion. I don't need belief. I don't need trust. I have their experience. Their life was at stake on the same level as mine was. It worked for them. It's going to work for me. Now, where does God appear in all of this place? Well, let's go back to page 35. We'll read a little bit, because I really skipped ahead. People don't make miracles. The third paragraph on page 35. God does. The addict's role in recovery is thus really no more than just get out of the way so that God can make recovery happen. If that sounds like some kind of voodoo imaginary magic bullet, just remember how much incredibly hard work it actually takes to get out of the way. If it were really so easy to let God do His business, then addicts will need to resort to numbing themselves into oblivion in a desperate attempt to replicate this effect. Would they? If we could all just snap our fingers and become selfless, we wouldn't need to follow a program that trains us to live in harmony with God. We'd really just be doing it. So do not be mistaken. Recovery is hard work, just not in the sense that we often think of it. Because it's not the work of doing. Recovery is the work of not doing. To wit, a major misconception about the 12 steps is that they are a self-help program. I've actually heard mental health professionals, albeit no ones who specialize in addiction, refer to 12 steps as such. This description is completely inaccurate. The 12 steps are the very opposite of self-help. Active addiction is self-help. I can take care of myself the only way I know how because no one else can or will. Recovery is God help. I can't continue trying to do for myself what only God can really do for me. So now, really, this manual that we're talking about is not about what I need to do, but more of it is how do I get out of the way? If I want God to make a miracle in my life, I have to admit that a miracle is needed. There's a very, very interesting talk by Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Lubavitch, the previous Chabad Rebbe, that discusses the difference between hope and trust. What's the difference between hope and trust? The two scenarios are of a man drowning. The man is drowning, and there is no piece of wood floating right by his hand. There is no stone coming right as he's coming down there. There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. He's drowning. Now at this point, no human help. It's clear to him that no human help can save him. So, he trusts that God will save him. Hope, and pay attention for a little bit, hope is not that bad. It's a good thing to hope that God will save you. But hope is the exact same scenario where there's nothing that will save me. The only difference is that there is a piece of straw that's floating right next to my hand. Straw. You understand what straw is? Yeah? The straw is not strong enough to support the weight of my body. There is no way that the straw is going to save me. But I hold on to it. I hold on to the straw. When I hold on to the straw, I'm downgrading my relationship with God from trust to hope. Because I'm kind of giving him a little hand there. Well, God maybe can do huge miracles like saving me with nothing, but hey, maybe he can transform the straw to become so heavy and so strong to carry me. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to have trust even when there's a straw, but that's the scenario. The scenario is, do I think that I have room for myself, for my input? Is there something else besides God that's going to help me? Or it is clear to me that all human help is not going to save me. Almost like trying to have my cake and eat it too. Until I totally and absolutely renege of the idea that I can save the situation, there's no real room for God to make a miracle. I'm disturbing, I'm distracting, I'm taking space. And the only way I can allow for the miracle of recovery to come in is if I am totally void of my own ego, which we discussed in the previous chapter. That is a big block between me and God. It is the lock, the double lock, that prevents God from entering in my life. My idea, my perception that I have it covered, I just need God's help, is a slap in the face of God instead of a welcome. Are you ever in the kitchen and you're cooking and someone comes in and wants to help you, but you got it all under control? They're like, I'll do anything. Well, what should I do? And you give them the towel and say, why don't you wipe some dishes? I want to make the cake. I want to do the roast. Oh no, okay. And in a sense, when we try to keep some control in our life, we're telling God, I will do all that I can, because I can't do a lot. Whatever I can get to, please fill in for me. Whatever I don't like doing, you do for me. Now, is that an invitation to be part of my life? Or is that a consolation price if you're desperate? So that's our choice what we do with it. And I think that, let me just go one more to go back to the idea of what worked on page 39. In the second paragraph in the middle of the page where it says the science of spirituality. My personal take is that the 12 steps were not invented so much as they were discovered. The steps were the sum total of real experience gained through a process of much painful trial and error, where the stake were quite literally life and death. That's what we talked about before. By seeing what worked, that is, by what principle and actually live, the original members of the fellowship came to understand some basic rules for living. Thereby they were able to arrive at certain irreducible needs of human spirituality. In other words, those who developed the program did not set out to create a new religion or a new sect of a pre-existing one. They were searching for the most basic and universal spiritual truths, not through philosophical investigation, but by actual experimentation. That is a very important distinction. In this sense, the steps are actually closer to science than religion, which I was trying to tell before. We have two ways of finding out what works for us. One way is by believing in the Creator and all that stuff, which is great and works for a lot of people. And the other one is by testing. Yes, the steps are spiritual, but a spiritual principle determined by seeing what actually works. The steps are, if you will, a scientific study and application of spirituality. And this is that has to do with Judaism, so I just want to read this one more piece. This, by the way, answers a question that troubles many of my fellow Jews who ask how I can attribute such validity to a spiritual program that does not come from the Torah. And he's a rabbi. So he has a responsibility when he says, this is good. What does it mean? The Medrash says, Medrash is this esoteric part of the Torah. If a person should tell you there's wisdom among the nations, believe it. But if he tells you there's Torah among the nations, do not believe it. We must distinguish between wisdom and Torah. Wisdom refers to human insight, while Torah is godly revelation. The Jews hold no monopoly on human insight. But it is foundational to our belief that we uniquely received the Torah from God at Sinai. The 12 steps are not Torah, but they most certainly are wisdom. The fact that they are the product of human experience and experimentation does not lessen, L-E-S-S-E-N, misspelling here, their validity. You sent them already? As a tried and true way of life, but to the contrary, only strengthens it for us. I've heard Jews in recovery say they believe the steps were written under divine inspiration, quote unquote. I'm not part of this camp. Firstly, I'm not qualified to determine what is or is not divine inspiration, a term which our tradition uses quite rarely to describe only a very particular state of consciousness. Secondly, I find such a proclamation wholly unnecessary, when we can just as easily rely upon the definitive ruling of the great 12th century philosopher and legalist Maimonides, who said, accept the truth regardless of its source. If it works, you can't argue with it. You can argue. There was back in Russia when the first train came to the villages, people did not believe that this heavy wagon could move without a horse pulling it. They can't believe it. They heard from Moscow that there's this thing. For months and months they saw these workers put down the rails through their village, but they did not believe that those stories were true until one day a locomotive shows up and pulls not one wagon but 20 wagons and it's parked in the train station in the little village. And everyone applauds, everyone is there, the whole village saw this miracle. How the locomotive is pulling without any horses. But there was one guy there who says, I know the trick. And he went right under it. He said, what are you doing? He says, I'm sure this horse is hiding inside the box. And that, it doesn't matter. People had trouble believing that there was a train that can ride without horses. But once the train came into the station, beside that little skeptical guy who was looking for the little horses, everyone had to stop arguing because the train came now. It's in the station. Or actually, I think in English is an expression, the train has left the station. The boat has sailed. The boat has sailed. We can argue all day about the validity of the 12 steps before they work. But after they work, Maimonides says there's nothing to argue about. The boat has sailed. So the boat has sailed. Have a great evening.